many founders spiral into depression after they sell. They buy the boat, and 6 months later, they are miserable because they lost their purpose. Do you try to warn your clients about that void before they sign?
As a broker, we're the psychiatrist as well, so you need to be very careful.
Selling a business while you are still running it is like having an affair. You have to take meetings in secret. You can't let the employees see the emails, and one slip-up can ruin the company culture before the deal is even signed. How do you coach a founder to live a double life for 6 months without cracking?
If you don't do everything in the right process, the deal will fall apart. It's our experience of doing thousands of transactions. Nobody should find out about it.
Selling your business is like having an affair. You have to live a double life. Hiding meetings, secret calls, one slip-up and the deal is dead. Thomas Milana is a senior partner at Transworld Business Advisors, a firm that has brokered billions in sales, and he is one of only 50 master intermediaries in the world. We are talking about why your business isn't worth what you think it is and the identity crisis that hits after the check clears. It's time to find out what your life's work is actually worth. Quick interruption. If you are enjoying this conversation and finding value in these stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like the video right now. It's the best way to support the show because it genuinely helps us continue to produce high-quality episodes and ensure we can keep bringing you meaningful content. I appreciate you watching. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Thomas, you handle transactions worth millions, but usually the person across the table isn't just selling an asset. They are selling their life's work. When a founder sits down with you to sell their baby, are they looking for a check or are they looking for permission to let go?
It's a really good way of putting that. I like that. First of all, we handle transactions in the range of 0 to 100 million in revenue, with our average sales price being about $1 million. Last year, we did 1 billion in sales. So it's a lot of transactions.
Whoa.
Right? There's 250 offices. We're in 20 countries and growing. Right? Here in Florida, we sell about 400 businesses a year. We've done that every year for the last 5 to 10 years. I like the question. I've never really thought about it like that. And I believe the answer is they are certainly looking for permission to let go, and they're scared because they want to know, are their employees going to have a job? Am I going to have enough money after the transaction to retire or live or move on to the next phase? Right? And so as it's part of our job to make sure that they're not leaving any money on the table. Perfect example, a person comes to me, owns a manufacturing company here in Fort Lauderdale, been in existence for well over 35 years, has no children. Him and his wife are in their 70s, and it's time to let go. But it's scary, right? Yeah. And so in many instances, they will say, hey, even after I sell, how can I stay involved? Right? I mean, it's just so much fishing and vacationing I can do, or I'm not leaving the area. I want to stay involved. So we can normally work that type of scenario, that transition into the agreement, depending on the buyer and what they plan to do with the business.
What do you see more? Do you see people just mostly it being about the check, or do you see more where it's kind of like, well, it's going to be great money, but I'm having a tough time letting go?
Really, it depends on the character, right? Yeah. I would say, I mean, if we have to look at percentages, it's about the money. It's about, am I going to have enough money to survive after this business is sold? The number one question from every buyer is, why is this business for sale? Who sells a perfectly good business? If I walked into a company and the owner was only 35 or even 50 years old, and he said, well, I want to retire, the buyer's going to feel, well, this person is too young to really retire. What do you mean by that?
Right.
Whereas if I have a gentleman who's in 70s or 80s and then, hey, I've been working forever and I grew this from nothing, then it would make more sense. It really comes down to that motivational factor that we try to figure out why we're even there.
Yeah.
My first question when I walk into a seller appointment would be, why am I here?
And of course, like with everything else in life and in business, a lot of times when you first meet someone, you have the right question in your head for your goal and for their goal. But a lot of times you just get the surface level
sort of answer, vision, reaction.
Right.
Do you find that that's the case until you start peeling back the layers of the onion and you see, oh, okay, well, they owe all this money to the IRS, or they have a partnership they didn't tell me about that they're just trying to get out of.
Using the onion is what we use as well. We call it an onion. Being Sicilian, I call it an artichoke. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We are sometimes the last person to find out 100% of the truth. And so we're constantly trying to peel back that onion as to why we're here, what's going on with this business, right? So it's got to make sense at the end of the day. We are constantly asking questions, and in order to get a business valued properly and get it sold, we have to ask thousands of questions. It's not even hundreds. It could become 1,000 questions easily.
Yeah.
The nice thing is that those questions are pretty similar depending on that industry. Whether it's a restaurant or a manufacturer, I could ask you the same type of questions.
The same principles apply.
Yeah, the same principles apply. And so I don't need to be a chef to sell a restaurant. I don't need to be, the manufacturer to sell a manufacturing plant, but I need to ask the right questions.
Thomas, we always hear that time kills all deals, but in your experience, when a deal falls apart at the 11th hour, is it usually the financials, or is it because the owner got cold feet emotionally?
Yeah, it's usually the financials.
Okay, so it goes back to
It goes back to asking those right questions and peeling back the layers. Most deals fall apart in due diligence, right? So the buyer buys, the buyer and the seller come to terms. They sign a contract. That contract is now subject to buyer's inspection, right? A seller said, well, I make $1 million a year in EBITDA, and it turns out he only makes 600. Or he forgot to tell us that right now we're working with 2025 financials that are being prepared, so they forget to tell us that 2025 is down 30% and we sold it based upon the 2024 numbers. And so these new numbers, and then what happens is the buyer will either cancel or they'll try to retrade the deal. I recently had a transaction for a large construction company for almost $15 million. The due diligence worked out perfectly. The numbers were perfect. The record keeping was perfect. But the buyer tried to beat up the seller at the very end and tried to get a $2 million price reduction. And it fell apart because of that. But most of the time, 90% of the time, it's the lack of good record keeping from a business owner.
So for founders that are listening, record keeping is key. Speaking of founders, I've read that many founders spiral into depression after they sell. They buy the boat, and 6 months later, they are miserable because they lost their purpose. Do you try to warn your clients about that void before they sign?
Well, as a broker, we're the psychiatrists as well. We don't necessarily warn them. We'll say, what do you plan to do after the sale? Right? And that will then, hey, well, I plan to travel with my wife and I. Perfect example, again, is that same company. They had a brand new RV sitting in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Plan was to go and see all the national parks. Okay, so that's a year. What happens after that's over, right? So usually we don't get that involved with what their plans are after the fact, but it does come up in conversation because, again, we're trying to make sure we understand their motivation for selling.
And of course, you're looking for red flags as well.
Absolutely. We don't take on every transaction. We insist on doing good deals for good people at Transworld. And so if we feel that there's something awry, we'll step back. It's got to make sense.
I was looking at your credentials, Thomas. You are one of only 50 master certified business intermediaries in the world. That is a rare tier. What does a master see in a business P&L that a regular broker misses completely? And before you answer that, for people who don't know what a P&L is, could you just give a quick definition of that?
Sure. A profit and loss statement. As a broker, well, first of all, we're not accountants. Some of us have MBAs, I do not. Part of our job is to recast the work of the customer's accountant, right? Your accountant prepares your financials and your taxes, your tax returns, and it's their job to minimize any tax responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
It's our job as the broker to do a business evaluation and determine what the true profitability is of the business. So while you might be writing off your living room or your personal Corvette on your business, and your accountant takes those deductions, we would take that expense and add it back to the bottom line. So what we're doing is we're looking at the profit and loss statements, we're looking at the income statements, the tax returns, and we're formulating a valuation. As a master certified business intermediary, my education is in how to do that properly and what most people don't realize. So in the state of Florida, in order to be a business broker, we have to have a real estate license. We're one of 20 states in the entire country that need to have a license. What that means is that most people that sell businesses don't have licenses, right? So you need to be very careful. Then, if you're talking about selling the highest price transaction that you, the business owner, will ever do, much like selling your $1 million house, now you're going to hire somebody that doesn't have any education or experience in dealing with businesses.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to make sure that they have those continuing education credentials, such as the certified business intermediary or the master certified business intermediary. What does it all mean? It means that I have more education, not only in books and classroom time, but actually doing the transactions. And that's what counts. You wouldn't hire an accountant, right, to do your taxes if they were just somebody on the street.
Of course. And just so I'm clear and everybody listening, you can buy and sell a company in all 50 states, right? With the education and certifications you have.
Well, again, I'm not buying and selling anything, right?
Oh.
I'm the broker.
Oh, I
And
see.
the business owner is hiring us to confidentially sell their company. I get that a lot.
Okay.
I'm not a buyer. I don't buy or I don't sell. I'm a broker. It's my job to confidentially value and go to market and vet the buyers and help much like a real estate broker would help you sell your house.
Yeah.
Although they don't do it on a confidential basis, right? The real estate agent wants the whole world to know that the house is for sale. I don't want anyone to know that the business is for sale. I just want to find the one right person, right? And so I might go through hundreds of buyers without letting anyone know that it's your business for sale. I'm vetting each and every customer.
In your company presentation, which you sent to me, you mentioned that your company, Transworld, quarterbacks the entire deal. A lot of entrepreneurs think they can sell their business themselves to save the commission. Where do unrepresented sellers usually fumble the ball?
All the above. It's the valuation. They're going on to ChatGPT and they're going into some reference guides, and they simply think that their business is worth a multiple. Is it worth 2 times? Is it worth 3 times? But they don't know the proper way of doing valuation. They have no idea, for the most part, how to handle a due diligence. In many instances, and it's very scary, is the seller and a buyer will get together. The buyer will give the seller a non-binding letter of intention, and then the seller will open up his books to this person, only to waste 3, 4, 5 months just to find out that this person has decided to steal their private information and use it somewhere else. So be very careful. But even worse than that, you have a business, the owner's working 40 to 60 hours a week. And where are you going to find the time as the seller to sell the business? I work a good 50, 60-hour week for others, right? Are you able to work, run your restaurant for 60 hours a week and then spend another 50 hours trying to sell your own restaurant?
Right. And they obviously don't have the expertise either.
Right.
And it's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. The last thing you want to do is let the employees know that you're selling the business, that your customers know, that your vendors know, your landlord know. And if you don't do everything in the right process, the deal will fall apart. And not only will the deal fall apart, you could go out of business.
Because you don't want to cause a panic, not just with everybody internally, but with your customers too.
Yeah.
Imagine word got out that the customers knew you wanted to sell your company. You're going to go to your competitors.
Right.
Like, oh, maybe something's wrong with their product or service.
Exactly.
Right?
How many times have you walked into a business, like maybe your favorite restaurant, just to say, hey, wow, something's different? They fired the chef and there's a new chef. I did that with a local restaurant here in Fort Lauderdale about a year ago. Very, very well known. Been around for 55 years. And we found who we thought was a good buyer. They had the credentials to operate a restaurant. They had the money. We had the transaction. And in week number 1, they fired the chef that had been there for 30 years.
Oh, man.
Hired a new chef, changed the vendors, the people that were supplying the meat and everything else. This was a Mexican restaurant. And long story short is they're out of business today. They literally had to close the doors.
That happened to me. I lived in Brooklyn for a long time and in New York for over 3 decades. And there was a Turkish restaurant that I loved there. It was called Sahara on Coney Island Avenue, if anybody knows it. And I used to love going there for years and years until they changed the chef, and also the owner died. And the quality of the food just started to plummet. And I remember I was super young, but I just remembered I was like, what happened? It was just so disappointing. You don't know until you find out much later what the mechanics behind it was, these changes that they made. But you as a customer, you're just, I want my platter. I want it to be as good as it was before.
Right.
So you don't want to cause a panic.
You don't want to cause a panic. Many of the South Florida leases have clauses that if you ask for a lease assignment, the landlord can hold it against you. And so if you talk to the landlord prematurely, or you don't know how to talk to the landlord about, hey, I decided to retire and sell my business, you can be in big trouble financially.
So if you're excited about selling your business, don't tell that many people, or don't tell anyone really, until you have somebody.
Keep it quiet.
Keep it quiet. Keep it hush-hush until you have somebody like Thomas and his team who can give you this kind of consulting. And like you said, you're sort of like a therapist in a way.
Therapist.
What's the hardest conversation you have to have? How do you look a founder in the eye and tell them the business they spend 20 years building isn't worth what they think it is?
Part of what I do, you have to be able to be honest with somebody, be respectful, right? So I do a lot of listening. I come from New York as well, so I have that little touch of sarcasm in my way of speaking.
Sure.
But I think I know how to talk to people also. We have to educate, right? We come into the meeting, we explain who we are, we show our credentials, and then we listen to the owner, and then we have to educate the owner. And I think if they're educated properly, there's really no issue. Not everybody wants to sell their business. Maybe they just want the value. Maybe they're not ready. And so we'll do some exit planning strategies with them also. Let me come into your business. Let me tell you what the value is today. And based upon what I review, maybe I can help you increase the value so we can sell it 4 or 5 years from now.
Do you have a situation ever where you tell a business owner, well, it's not worth what you think, and they just start fighting with you and getting super emotional and arguing with you, telling you, no, you're wrong, it's worth a lot more?
I don't argue. Again, I educate. I don't argue. I will, in some instances, take the overpriced listing. If you think your business is worth $3 million and I think it's worth $1 million, and here's why, sometimes I'll go ahead and take that listing at $3 million. And guess what? It'll sell for $1 million, probably 6 or 7 months later. Our marketing agreements are at least a year. So once you engage me, we're married for a year. Right? It might take 6 months of no buyers walking through, or having a couple of lowball offers, to understand what the true value is. Because the true value of the business is not predicated on what you think it's worth. It's predicated on what the buyer thinks it's worth. Right?
And the market.
Well, the buyer is the market at the end of the day. We're not selling houses where I can compare your house to the neighbor's house. Right? My neighbor just sold for $600,000. Does that mean my house is worth 600? Well, it's a good baseline.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to businesses, I have to be able to, I can't say, well, your restaurant is worth X because of the restaurant next door. It doesn't work that way.
Sure.
That it has to do with the fundamentals of the business. I could have two restaurants, both making $5 million a year in revenue, but one has a profit of 300,000 and one has no profit.
Yeah.
Okay. Which one's worth more? I might have a restaurant where the owner's working 70 hours a week and the other guy's not even there.
Right.
He owns it. The owner lives in Germany and he's running the business from Germany. Which one's worth more? The one that's the guy's living in Germany.
Yeah.
Right. So there's so many different aspects to evaluation.
Sure.
But again, I have listed businesses, so-called overpriced, but because I educated the customer in the beginning, when those prices came in, they understood the value and accepted it.
I saw that for 19 years you've been the senior chef for the LifeNet for Families pasta dinner. You spent your days dealing with high-stakes mergers and your nights feeding the hungry. Does that service keep you grounded when you're dealing with massive egos all day?
Community involvement keeps me grounded. That particular event that you're talking about is a once a year event up until last year. I think 2023 was actually our last year that we did that. We raised over $2.2 million in what's known as Andy's Pasta Dinner. And so, which was started by Andy Cagnetta, the CEO of Transworld. I started in 2007. So when I first started, we were feeding about 20 or 30 people that came to a dinner at the pantry. We taught kids how to make pizza, and we were feeding everybody spaghetti and meatballs, and we were charging $25 a ticket, and all that money went to stock the food pantries. By the time we ended and raised over 2.2 million, we were feeding 1,000 people at $75 a pop. And it was awesome. But I'm also heavily involved with United Way, Junior Achievement, teaching the next brokers out there, right, what to do. Unfortunately, our education system doesn't give enough financial education and business education.
Right.
So Junior Achievement is an awesome organization doing that. And so helping out in the community, again, we do good deals for good people and we try to stay involved with those good people.
To me, that's what also separates you from a lot of people who do what you do, where it's not always just about the numbers, the money. You're giving back to society. I think that creates an even more fulfilling environment inside of your work culture once you come back to the office. And if there's other people involved with that, or you even telling about it, it gives you more purpose, right, with what you do. It's not as cold and dry.
Right. No, it's definitely not cold and dry. I mean, everybody, I can tell you, there's always a rotten apple, but there's 99% of the people in the company give back to their community in some way or fashion, whether it's their time. We have big brothers and big sisters donating their time. We have people that donate thousands and thousands of dollars.
I wouldn't necessarily call what you do cold and dry either. There is so much color in what you do. You meet so many different characters, like you said before. You become like a therapist while you're being a broker. And you mentioned the word marriage before. So, I'm hearing these buzzwords, therapist, marriage, but really this marriage is you're married for up to a year. Right? Sometimes longer. There's a lot of humanity that goes into what you do. These are really sensitive topics that you're dealing with. I'm a business owner. If I'm ready to sell my business and I'm dealing with a gentleman with your caliber, I would imagine it would be emotional for me, obviously very high stakes, but it would also be one of those things where you're just like, oh, I really got to lift up the hood with showing this individual in this company, everything about my business, good and bad. You are somebody who has to be really nuanced and careful and sensitive to the needs of the people you're doing these transactions for.
Most definitely. Unfortunately, we are always the last to find out all the information. For some reason, the buyers are liars and the sellers just don't give us 100% of the truth. And sometimes it's too late. All right. But again, most of the time, if we educate and provide the type of service that one would expect when dealing with a business owner like yourself, it tends to work out.
You project total confidence. You have to close the deals that you do. Take me back to the early years. Was there a time in your career when you were the one struggling? A year where the deals weren't closing and you thought about quitting?
I started with Transworld, 2007. Part of what we do as agents, whether we're real estate agents or selling houses or business brokers, is we need to get those listings, those engagements. And so I built my book of engagements. And what happened in 2008, 2009, the economy, the lights went out. And so, yeah, I mean, I started where the market had reached the top and then the bubble burst. And I said to myself, what am I going to do now? Because I had two young kids at home, right? Bills to pay like everybody else. And so the entrepreneurial spirit came in. And after talking to a couple of people that I trusted, I ended up opening up a cleaning company. Right? Though I tried to find myself a business that, regardless of what the economy was going on, people still needed to clean their businesses.
Recession proof.
They didn't have to clean their houses, right? But they had to keep their restaurants clean. They had to keep their office space clean. Had to. And so I made a bunch of phone calls. I went out and bought a bunch of vacuums. And I personally started cleaning.
Wow.
And so it started with one vacuum cleaner that I bought at a Sears, which isn't even open anymore. Right?
No, they closed.
And I kept that business going, even though the economy got better a year later. Right? 2010, things started to come back up. I kept that business going. I hired some people to do the cleaning. And after 5 years, I sold the company. And so,
good for you.
Again, entrepreneurial spirit to keep alive.
Got to do what you got to do.
You do what you got to do.
Yeah.
You do what you got to do.
I love that story. Your back was up against the wall. And, a lot of business owners, a lot of founders go through that. Employees go through that. Markets change, economies change, of course. And, when you got a family, especially, it's hard enough when you're single. You don't have any kids. You don't have a spouse. And you're terrified.
I was still a business broker. I was working till 5 or 6 o'clock every day as a broker. And then I wait for everybody to go home. And I would change out of my suit and tie.
Really?
And one of my first jobs was actually my office building.
Wow.
In which, when I decided to do this, I went to the owner and I said, hey, how much are you paying the cleaning crew? And he said, I don't know, $1,000 a month. So I'll do it for $900, or I do it for $800.
Wait, let me get this straight. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
It was the same office building you were working at that time? So you would change and then you would clean that office? I would
change, wait for everybody to go home, and then clean that office. That was my first customer.
Wow. You just blew my mind. I mean,
then from there, I just reached out into my sphere of influence and was able to build up a group of clients. Right.
You hustled your way to the top.
I hustled my way to survive.
Yeah. Right? And now you're thriving. Yeah.
And it's been great.
The lesson there really is none of us are ever too good, or nothing is really ever beneath us in order to take care of yourself and your family. Yes, you have the goal of being, the big broker, the 1 in 50 in the world with, certain certification or what you do. But everyone has a story, and every entrepreneur, every employee, every business owner, I certainly do. I've had my trials and tribulations, and there's always challenges, just like in life, where we'll always have problems. I love that story. You absolutely blew my mind with that story.
Again, you do what you got to do.
This is a high-stress 24/7 industry.
Mm-hmm.
Deals don't sleep. What has been the personal cost of operating at this level for so long? And what sacrifices did you have to make to get to that number one in the world spot?
Now you get into the emotional side of things. I've been divorced a couple of times. I've had family issues. I've had bouts with not drugs, but alcohol. And I've gotten past all of that, and it's made me better and stronger for who I am today. And I know I'm not the only one. I mean, listen, Florida's got thousands and thousands of realtors that I think 90% of realtors are divorced. I mean, it's insane. It's a high pressure job. It really, really is, because we get paid commission. That's it. It's 100% commission. And if you don't do your job, if you don't take care of the client, if you don't take care of the transaction, if you don't go to work in the morning, right? Nobody tells me to be at work at 9 o'clock. I tell myself to be there at 7 o'clock.
You have quite a story, Thomas. Really, you do. You blew my mind earlier with the fact that you were in your suit earlier on, after the financial crisis around that time, 2008, and then you were cleaning. You said you were cleaning the same building after. I've never heard of a story like that. It sort of reminds me of the sort of the phoenix, right? Rising from the ashes. That's who you are, or sort of that kai fish, right?
Listen, I grew up in New York, Long Island, New York, literally working 20, 30 hours a week when I was 12 years old. When I say worked, I mean worked. I really, really worked. Due to family issues, I worked.
Yeah.
And so I haven't stopped. I really haven't stopped. And I happened to, 1990, I happened to get married to a New York woman and moved to Florida. I've been here ever since, and been working, first as a real estate agent, then as a business broker.
Yeah, and then there's the other element that you mentioned that you mentioned you've been divorced a couple of times. I've also been divorced once, and I'm remarried, very happy. But I know what that does from personal experience, from firsthand experience, to not just a man's career and internals, anybody, right? Female, male, and I just remember how it was probably like for a year. There was like a year of depression where I really couldn't work. I couldn't function. I couldn't go out.
It's hard to think.
It's so hard. And then when I look back at it and I'm like, wow, that was me, but we survived, right? We survived. But as business owners, as founders, we think, what's going to happen to my business? Luckily for me, my business survived through all that.
Yeah. We are survivors, and I know you think I'm doing huge deals, but my average transaction is about $1 million. I mean, it's bigger than the smallest mom and pop, but it's a small transaction. I mean, last year we did transactions from 0 to 65 million. One of our associates in England did, I think it was 250 million. We're getting a name for ourselves as a more prominent M&A advisor, but we have built our reputation on Main Street businesses generating less than 5 million a year.
Yeah.
I handle a lot of construction companies. A lot of these guys have 1 truck or 5 trucks, landscaping guys, pool cleaning guys, janitorial guys.
Yeah.
That's the type of businesses that we're happy to represent, that hard worker. And if they've been able to stick around for 20 or 30 years in business, they're the type of people that we look for. They're the ones we want to help.
Yeah, and I heard also private equity is buying up so many.
There's a lot of money on
like
the sidelines.
Yeah.
HVAC is the big thing right now. HVAC, roofing, electrical contractors, they're all coming under one umbrella.
And just to close the loop of my idea here, what I was saying too is everything you've gone through gave you this sort of superpower where you can think on your feet really quickly. You can roll with the punches. You can deal with all this complexity with all the different kind of businesses and different companies and personalities.
It stems from coming from New York, right?
Yeah.
We have that kind of attitude.
That's true.
I had traveled abroad when I was very young. I'm very comfortable with sitting in the room with the Pope or the president, or as well as the homeless guy on the street.
I love that.
And so, yeah, I really believe I could talk to anybody, or appreciate anybody. And so that has enabled me. It's hard to teach somebody how to be a salesperson, right? You really need to be able to understand the psyche of other people,
right,
in order to do that.
Did the pandemic change the psychology of sellers, Thomas? Did you see a wave of people saying, life is too short, get me out of here?
Most definitely. Most definitely. In fact, our sales have doubled since the pandemic.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, we came out of 2020, so 2021 through this year have been the best years we've ever experienced. Um, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate so many people had lost their lives and families were interrupted. Um, but yeah, a lot of people came to us and said, you know what, now it's time. I actually had a couple of people that passed, one while I was in the beginning of doing the transaction, one like the day or two after it closed, all because of the pandemic. Right. But yeah, I think a lot of people got really scared as they should have and decided, what let's go enjoy life together.
But it was just like a mad rush of people, right? Because it overwhelmed you and you guys probably because you can't. Was it a lot
I wouldn't say
more
it
than
was a
normal?
mad rush. I would say that it was the light bulbs just started turning on, and and now the people that did that are basically the baby boomers, right? So the older baby boomers,
Yeah.
have decided now it's time, let's do it, you know, and not only now, a lot of the small mom and pop restaurant businesses didn't sell. They didn't go out of business. They work from paycheck to paycheck, right? But the larger companies stuck around that survived. Their prices, the valuations doubled, right? And they're the ones that decided to sell. But the whole baby boomer crowd, it hasn't stopped. I mean, we're still busier than we've ever been.
Selling a business is hard. Selling a family business is a soap opera. How do you manage the table when the dad wants to sell, but the son thinks he should take over?
Find me a son that thinks he wants to take over. Right now, most people are selling because they have no one to leave it to.
Oh, I see.
They either have children that do not want to work as hard as their parents worked.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I can't even think of one business over the last few years in which a child had taken over for their parent. It does not happen here in South Florida.
That surprises me. I just learned something new.
Does not happen in South Florida. This is the reason why so many businesses are for sale, right? Because they have no one to give it to.
It's not like the old days, like what we see in older movies, or when people are depicting older days in movies, where it's kind of like, oh, the son and, the grandkids take over.
I have offices in 49 states and 20 countries, and I can tell you, at least here in the United States, the children of today do not want to take over their parents' jobs.
For the layperson, explain the earnout. It sounds like a nightmare. Selling your company, but then having to work for the new owner for 3 years. How do founders survive becoming an employee in their own house?
Well, first of all, an earnout is just another tool in structuring a deal. What is an earnout? The simple way of thinking about it is you want to sell your business for $5 million. However, today the business is only worth $3 million, and you might have $2 million in a pipeline that you think is all that's supposed to close between now and the next year or two. So the buyer says something to the effect of, well, I'll pay you $5 million, but I'll give you $3 million today, and I'll give you another $2 million at the end of next year if the gross sales meets a certain number. Right?
Yeah.
And if you do better, you'll get maybe a dollar for dollar better, or if you do worse, you'll get dollar for dollar less. It's not the usual transaction. It's not the typical transaction. It does happen. It's simply another tool in the tool belt. Sometimes the owner sometimes the business does have that kind of a pipeline where it should happen. And so in order for the seller to gain more money at the end of the day, he'll accept an earnout. But typically our transactions are cash, seller holding a promissory note, usually 25% or less. or SBA financing.
That reminds me, I actually did have a client where he sold his company, did very well. They kept him on for earnout. The original agreement was, I think, 2 years for an earnout, but he ended up staying for like 4. They needed his help. But during that time, while he was there, this question about, how do they survive as now as sort of an employee, a consultant in their own house? That particular client had a very hard time letting go of control, and in fact, they kept his partner on as not a consultant. They carved out a role for him, and he's still working there because he just kind of kept this. He had his head low, and
Mhm.
he wasn't sort of like rocking any boats. But the original co-founder, the person I'm talking about, they had a hard time with him, and he had a hard time with them. He was trying to tell them what to do,
Right.
and they were just like, well, a publicly traded company bought them.
You're
C-suite
talking
people.
about a larger transaction.
Yeah.
And there are situations, whether you sell to a public company or a private equity group.
Oh, really?
Private equity groups usually buy the business. They pay fair market value for it. However, sometimes they don't buy 100% of the company. They only buy 70 or 80% of the company. And their initial business plan keeps the business owner on for at least a 5-year period at an agreed upon salary, right? And then, yeah, there are instances where that seller does not get along with that buyer.
Yeah.
And so there'll probably be some type of an escape clause for the buyer within there so
Yeah.
that they can get rid of the seller. Depends if they keep equity or not. Again, for the seller, the job is to get as much liquidity off the table at the time of sale, because things like that can happen. Doesn't happen often. But even in a Main Street business, I'm selling a business now. It's been around for 30 years. There's only 5 employees. The business was grown because of the seller's relationships. Well, if the seller leaves, what happens to those relationships? Does the business continue? Every buyer's worst nightmare is I buy the business, and the next day the customers say, I don't want to do business with you anymore. I do business with him.
Right.
And so you have one customer that represents more than 20% of your revenue, and that was a personal relationship with the seller. Now what?
Right.
And so these are the instances where you pull those tools out. You pull out the earn-out structure. That might save you. Where maybe the seller's holding a note which is tied to customer retention, right? There's different ways of structuring the deal to try to mitigate any problems that the buyer might have moving forward.
We talked earlier about private equity. Is private equity buying up everything? Plumbing, HVAC, medical practices? Is the day of the mom and pop Main Street business over?
It's definitely not over. There is a mad rush right now for private equity groups to buy service-related businesses.
Okay.
So if you own an electrical contractor, you would you might add that to a plumbing company. You might add that to an HVAC company. And there are some pretty big players right now that are buying up. In fact, we just sold one of the largest HVAC companies in town to private equity. And so mom and pop, no, they're not all getting bought up. They're not buying the one man in a truck contractor. Right? They're buying the guys that have been around, that have 20, 30, 40 employees and more. Right? They're not buying up the concrete guys. They're buying up the service. They're looking for those service contracts. You have a service contract with your HVAC company here. They're looking to buy those contracts.
Understood. Selling a business while you are still running it is like having an affair. You have to take meetings in secret. You can't let the employees see the emails, and one slip up can ruin the company culture before the deal is even signed. How do you coach a founder to live a double life for 6 months without cracking?
Well, what we'll do is we'll tell the seller in the very beginning, just continue to operate the business, right? And refrain from talking to any personnel. Every now and then, though, there is a key person that needs to understand about what's going on. And you don't want to lie to your employees. The last thing you want to do is make your employees feel uncomfortable, but it's our experience of doing thousands of transactions. Nobody should find out about the sale until it's done.
Right.
And so we will continue to remind the owner not to. If they do, we always suggest to have confidentiality contracts signed with those employees before you do so. We can't make people do things, right? We can't make the horse drink at the lake. We can just try to educate them. And again, it comes down to education from the very first meeting.
Every business owner swears their books are clean until due diligence starts. Then the skeletons come out. What is the craziest thing you've ever found in a company's closet during the audit phase? Off the books cash, a lawsuit they forgot to mention?
Cash we don't like to talk about. And again, I'm not the accountant, but yeah, there's cash. An owner might say, well, I have $100,000 in cash that comes in. Well, when it comes to cash as a business broker, we have a saying. You can only steal it once. Okay. You can either deposit your cash and it shows up in your bank statement and on your tax return, or put it in your pocket and forget about it and never talk about it again. Because if you do, you could be opening up liability down the road. However, some sellers will insist that, or you might be dealing with a cash business, and there are still some all cash businesses out there. And so, for example, a coin laundry. Coin laundries are coins.
Right.
All right. At the end of the day, I have to be just as honest with the buyer. And the buyer says, well, I want to see the financials. And I have to say, well, it doesn't matter what they look like. It's cash and it's not provable.
Thomas, that is a powerful place to leave it. Thank you for trusting me with that. I want to leave the founders listening with one specific thought. You mentioned to me offline that markets change, buyers change, and timing matters. If there's anyone listening who is considering an exit, whether that is now or in the near future, and wants to navigate that timing correctly, I'm putting Thomas's direct contact info right here on the bottom of the screen. I've also linked his full profile and those details in the description below. Thomas, thank you for the masterclass.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this conversation and got value from this episode, then you're going to love what's coming up next. The YouTube algorithm thinks this is the exact episode that you need to watch next. Click right here and I'll see you over there.